Hello everyone and welcome to a really wild game from round 10 of the new in chess classic Meltwater Champions chess tour. It's Magnus Carlsen versus Hikaru Nakamura, and everyone was very much interested. Will they again go for their famous 3-move draw with the double bomb cloud, or will they play an actual game this time? Well, the result was very satisfying for everyone. Now, without further ado, let's check it out. Magnus with the white pieces opens with e4. We have e5 by Hikaru, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to c4. We have bishop to c5 by Hikaru, and here Magnus went for the Evans gambit, b4. Of course, that is, not true, but almost true, because he went c3 for the main line of the Giuoco Piano, and after knight to f6, then he played b4. So let's say a delayed Evans gambit, but not just yet. First he played d3, and only after castles now he played b4. So there you have it, b4 is on the board. We have bishop back to e7, and now knight b to d2. We have d5, this has all been played before, nothing new here. Bishop to b3 and a6 now. And there is one game from the 2016 Rapid Grand Prix Russia. From the finals, Daniel Dubov Daniel Dubov drew a game against Dmitry Yakovenko here with castles here. But here Magnus goes queen to c2, and it is now already, as of move 9, that we have a completely new game. So let's see how Hikaru deals with this devious idea. He plays h6, takes away the g5 square from white's pieces, also creates some more breathing room for the king. Maybe later on in the game, maybe ideas like maybe knight h7 to g5 are possible. Maybe you can push f5. All depends on how white develops. So here we have castles by Magnus and bishop to e6, just nicely continuing development. We have rook to e1 by Magnus and rook to e8. Bishop to b2, both bishops are now nicely eyeing that black king, so if the position opens up, could be fireworks on the board. We have bishop to f8, opening up the e-file for the rook, and also the bishop now will help out with the defense a little bit if needed. We have a4, Magnus grabs more space on the queen side, and now b5 by Hikaru, striking in the center. You do not want to allow white to push b5, and here just h3. Also taking away the g4 square from black's pieces, and here Hikaru trades in the center. We have d captures on e4, d captures on e4, and now queen to d7, developing the queen, connecting rooks, and asking what do you want to play here. So here you could bring your rook into the game. You could maybe try shifting the knight to f1, maybe to g3 or e3, but Magnus decides to trade everything off the board. We have bishop captures, queen captures, pawn captures on b5, pawn captures, and rook captures on a8. We have rook captures, and now queen to d3. So here Magnus says, okay, I've traded some pieces and some pawns off the board, and now I'm attacking your b5 pawn. So how can Hikaru react to this? Well, he could defend it with rook to b8, which is what he did, and the move does seem to be a bit more passive than the, for example, rook to a2 seems like a very active idea. But as you'll see, rook to b8 does seem to be a superior move, because here, for example, if rook b1, you defend the bishop, we're going to play knight a7, defend our b5 pawn, and now black's position is fine, but the white can maybe play this freeing c4 move, open up the dark square bishop, and now, for example, after captures, we get this position, and this is perfectly fine for black, but maybe it's giving white a little too much. So here Hikaru plays rook to b8 instead, seemingly more passive, but as you'll see, works quite better. Magnus plays rook to a1, he prepares to bring another attacker to the b5 pawn, and now knight to e7. And here Magnus did spend some time. I think he spent like 4 minutes, regarding this move, and that's a lot since you only have 15 from the start. This is rapid time format, and he played rook to a5. And here already Magnus was down to some 4 minutes on the clock, whereas Hikaru had 9 and something. It's a very interesting idea, because here Hikaru does have a very special move here, but I'm just gonna show you what happens if you try c4 now. c4 again is possible here, but then you just play b captures on c4, knight captures, and rook captures. So black wins a pawn in this line, but after rook to c1, you will probably have no problem, fighting against the passed c pawn, but maybe you will. I mean, it's rapid chess. You do not want to play something like that. So Magnus plays rook to a5, and here he gives Hikaru an option for a very well, sneaky idea, so feel free to pause the video and try to find this idea for Hikaru while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting the move with the knight forward. This time it's not with the knight back. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's knight to g6. And this is just a very nice jump, preparing knight to f4 with an attack on the queen. And now the problem is you don't have rook captures on b5, because if you do this, then knight to f4 attacks the queen. And after the queen moves, you still have to keep an eye on this rook. Now we capture, and after queen captures, now we play queen to a2. And this is very much a problem because your bishop is under attack and there's really no good way to defend it. If you play knight to c4, this just loses on the spot, just queen to b1 check, king to h2, and now queen to f1, threatening checkmate, and there really is no good way to prevent this. If knight to e3 defending and attacking the queen, then we just pick up the queen on b5. So this would not be possible to defend the bishop like this with knight to c4, so you'd probably have to play something like queen captures on e5, hope for a trade here, bishop for knight for bishop, but then the problem is you get this knight to d3 move attacking the queen and the bishop, and here after the white queen moves wherever, we're just gonna pick up this bishop here, be up a piece, and have a very, very enjoyable game. White would be up 2 pawns, but it's maybe it's plausible, who knows. But okay, after rook to a5, of course this is a rapid game, you can't really see everything, or maybe even go for it. Maybe he saw it and maybe he decided, okay, it's not worth even a piece for 2 pawns. Maybe it's gonna be hard, not a lot of time on the clock. So he just defended his b5 pawn with c6, and now bishop to c1. Trying to activate this bishop somehow. We have knight to c8, now preparing to shift the knight over here. From there you're going to have a lot of pressure, there's going to be a double attack on the e4 pawn, also you're going to defend the f5 square, which is very important, and so at some point white will probably try and bring his knight to f5, so there's also that. So here we have knight to f1, Magnus continues with his plan, and now knight to d6, like we mentioned. We have knight to g3 now, and here the problem is Magnus only has 3 minutes on the clock, whereas Hikaru has some 8 minutes, and here Hikaru goes for queen to c4. Going for a queen trade, there were a lot of possibilities here, but again, he doesn't want Magnus to have too much time to think, and this does make sense. So here we have captures, and now we have rook back to a1. The rook is under attack, and now comes c5. Busting open on the queen side, captures, and now king to f1. The king must now come into the game, the queens are off the board. We have knight to d6, now with a double attack on this pawn here, and now knight to d2 defending. And still, Magnus needs to figure out how he's gonna get this dark square bishop into the game. So here we have h5, trying to remove one of the defenders of the e4 pawn, and Magnus just defends it with f3. So now the knight can move. Hikaru still pushes h4, and now comes knight to f5. The problem is after knight to e2, seems like maybe it's playable. This knight really doesn't have a future. There is no square where this knight can go to. You could go like to g1, but I mean, what's the knight doing on g1? So instead, Magnus goes forward. After h4, he goes knight to f5, and here Magnus was already down to 1 minute and some 25 seconds on the clock. So here Hikaru captures, we have captures, now doubling Carlsen's pawns here, and knight to d5 now, going after the c3 pawn. So knight to e4 defending and attacking the bishop here, and bishop to e3 now. So offering a trade of bishops here, and you can't really oblige here, because if captures with check, you're also going to lose the f5 pawn at the end of this trade. So instead we have bishop to a3. Now the bishop does become a bit more active. Maybe ideas like bishop here are possible with a double attack, but rook to a8 immediately. And now Magnus just goes back, bishop to b2, and here Hikaru grabs it. Rook captures, bishop captures, and now playing against Carlsen's weirdly placed bishop to c1. Now saying, okay, this bishop is stuck here. I'm not allowing it to go to b2. You cannot push c4, otherwise I just capture. And maybe I can get something like knight to e3 in, followed by knight to c2, and then I just pick up the bishop if possible. Magnus, of course, not interested in allowing that. He plays king to e2. And now the king can also help out with the defense there. But now comes knight to f4 with check. And also by moving the bishop, you're also just threatening knight to e3 check and, you know, just picking up the f5 pawn. So here king e2, Magnus solves that, and now knight to f4 check, now threatening the g2 pawn as well. So Magnus needs to go back. Knight back to d5, king to e2, we have knight to f4 check, king to g1, and here everyone thought that Hikaru will just repeat the position, and he did already go below 1 minute. He was down to some 40 seconds, and then he played f6. He said, nope, I'm just gonna defend this pawn, try and bring my king into the game, and we are playing this. My position is better, so why not? Magnus quickly went knight to d6, he goes after the b5 pawn, and now knight to d5. Again, Hikaru wants to deliver this check and pick up the f5 pawn. So king e2, not allowing this, and if you're thinking, okay, but why not give it up, why not just trade? Well, you could do that, but then after knight to e3 check, you have to go here. You cannot defend this pawn, because then the knight does come to c2 and you lose the bishop. There's that. So you would have to play something like king to e2, and then we can pick up the g2 pawn, and then, you know, who knows what's happening. So you know, capturing on b5, not all that great for black. So instead we have king to e2, and now again knight to f4 check, king to f1, knight to d5, king e2. Magnus pretty much, you know, hoping for a draw. There's nothing more for him there. There's this active knight, but this bishop is just terrible. And here Hikaru goes knight to c7. He defends the pawn and he continues the fight. Now he's gonna try to bring the king into the game. Maybe he can do something. And now Magnus just pushes this c4 pawn. He's been waiting to do this his entire game. We have b captures on c4, knight captures, and now knight to d5. And okay, now the pawns are no longer on the queen side, only king side pawns are now in the game, and now we need to shift our attention to the king side. So here knight to d6 and bishop to a3 now, attacking that knight. Here we have knight to e4 and now comes knight to e7, again attacking the f5 pawn. So f4 here. And what do you play now? We have e captures on f4 and king to f3. Here Magnus says, okay, you can capture on f5, but then I think if captures on f5, Magnus was not probably not gonna go with king captures on f4. Maybe he was even considering knight captures on f6 check, because this is pretty much a force to draw, because after captures and captures, you're also gonna capture this guy, push away this guy, capture this guy. For example, king f7, bishop g5, king g6, we're gonna capture on f4. And now if king h4, just g4 check, and now you kind of have to you have to capture, otherwise, you know, we just win the knight here. So captures, and now after bishop captures, there's no winning this position. Maybe if it was a blitz game, you know, with no time increment, then maybe you could, you know, try and flag white, but you know, with increment, you don't go for this. So Hikaru still keeps his options open. He plays bishop to c1, and now king to g4 by Magnus. We have knight to d5 and now bishop to d4. So waiting to see what Hikaru will do. We have bishop to e3, now offering a trade here. And while you could capture this, for example, bishop captures on e3, then f captures, and then this pawn is kind of strong. So instead we have knight to c3, now offering a trade here. If you go for offering a trade here after bishop to e3. If you go for the bishop captures on e3, then just f captures, like we mentioned. So instead we have knight to c3, and now comes knight to e7, declining this, because if you go for bishop captures, knight captures, then you know, white will be a little bit better here, but he doesn't enjoy that. So instead we have knight back to e7, and now comes knight to e2. And here players were kind of low on the clock, but not that much. I think Hikaru was still below 1 minute, Magnus somewhere around the 2-minute mark. And here, as none of the players could make any progress, they just repeated knight to d5. We have knight to c3, knight back to e7, knight to e2, knight to d5, and knight to c3. And it was in this position on move 57 that the players agreed to a draw, as there is nothing more to be done here. So really a tough game, especially for Magnus. As you can see, he's been struggling the entire game, and there really weren't no moments where he could have gone for something better, whereas there were a lot of moments where Hikaru probably could have gone for something better, like that, maybe a slight improvement with the knight G6 idea that we mentioned. But if you're wondering where Magnus really went wrong in this game, because he did have the white pieces, it was in fact in this position, right in the beginning, where he didn't go for the Evans Gambit. So he didn't go for the Evans Gambit, and then he suffered for the rest of the game. Don't let this happen to you in your own games. But yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Really a nice long struggle. I would like to thank Matthew Benoit, happy birthday Brad Rice, Rahul Karanath, Tiberiu, and Rahul Karanath for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon. Continuing the coverage of the candidates tournament tomorrow, checking up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.